In a previous lecture, we looked at a real research paper by a professor that used econometrics, and I wanted to take an opportunity to share with you some common problems that I read in papers by faculty members and papers by students. And some of these things will apply in economics papers or econometrics papers more than others, and you might not have seen them elsewhere, but some of these are just general common mistakes that I see time and time again. So let's just go ahead and get started here. Number one, the difference between ITS and ITS with an apostrophe. IT apostrophe S means it is. It's a contraction for it is, and that's all it ever means. You can never use it for the other its, which means possessive. So if it's just ITS, it's possessive. And a trick or a tip is if you have a sentence with just ITS in it and you want to make sure it works, change ITS to his and see if the sentence makes sense. If so, it's ITS. So an example sentence would be, it's sitting in its house. That means it is sitting in its house. So it's contraction for it is. Second, plurality. To make a word plural, you know this. Add an S or an ES, but don't add an apostrophe. Now, there are a couple of exceptions to this. There are some technical exceptions, but I'm not going to talk about those. The most common problem I see with making plurals is throwing an apostrophe S to make a plural. So, item 3, how should you use an apostrophe? There are two common uses for the apostrophe, and I'm not going to say there aren't others, but the two things you should use an apostrophe for is, number one, to make something possessive, like Sarah apostrophe S dog. Sarah's dog. The dog belongs to Sarah. If a word ends in S, add the apostrophe after the name. James' dog, or sometimes people pronounce that as James's dog, or the Joneses' dog. 3 exceptions. Its, as we talked about a minute ago. His and hers don't have an apostrophe in them. Second common use of an apostrophe is to mark omitted letters in contractions, as in can't. How you know where to put the apostrophe is where those missing letters are. It's cannot, but the NO in cannot has been removed. Hasn't. Same kind of thing. And so if you see an apostrophe, it means that there were omitted letters. And sometimes you see this in colloquial writing where someone will say a word that in a region of the United States like the South, people will omit a few letters in the word, and sometimes people will start the word in their writing with an apostrophe if they're quoting someone to represent those omitted letters. But never use an apostrophe to make something plural, like cucumbers, or to conjugate a verb. Like I complain, he complain, apostrophe S. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Don't do that. Item 4, common problem in writing that I see a lot. Vapid statements. A vapid statement means it's an empty statement. Try to avoid vapid statements. What do I mean? Well, don't waste words in your writing or write a sentence that is meaningless. Some examples of vapid sentences that I read in papers all the time. In the very first sentence of a paper, it'll say, my topic is important. People have struggled with this important issue forever. Mankind must solve this important problem. This is really important to think about. Well, what have we learned from all these sentences? Nothing. It doesn't convey information. It doesn't tell us anything. You might have been taught in an English class to say a simple idea using many, many words and many, many sentences. But in economics, we economize on words. We don't want to waste our time or waste our ink saying things that don't mean anything. So try to conserve on words and make sure that every sentence you use actually conveys something to someone. Now, it is okay to say that, for example, instead of just saying unemployment is important, don't say that. But if you want to follow it by saying unemployment is important, because it has been shown that as unemployment increases, so do suicides and crime rates. That's fine. That's a sentence that tells us some content. But just saying your topic is important or we should worry about it doesn't really tell us anything. Very common problem number 5, the difference between affects with an A and effects with an E. Affect is a verb with an A. Effect is a noun. And so you can say race may affect the probability of a conviction, but effect is a noun. The effect of race on the probability of conviction is unknown. So effect is the effect that you're measuring. Affect is how does this do something to? How does this affect the other word? Number 6, avoid overstating your results. Just because you find a correlation or a statistically significant relationship or something like that, don't say words like all of the time this happens, or none of the time this happens, or I have proven this, or I have disproven that, or we've shown that always this happens, or never, or this is the worst thing, or this is the best thing. These words are too strong for use in econometrics or statistical studies. They're probably wrong to use. And so instead of saying all or prove, say most of the time or very few people. This provides evidence in support of an idea, or this seems to contradict this idea, or most of the time or most often this happens, rarely this happens, or say something's bad but not the worst. And use these kinds of terms if they are more appropriate. Now, every rare once in a while, one of these strong words might be appropriate, but try to avoid using them if you can. Number 7, the difference between there, and there. There's a fence over there, so there is a fence over there, so there is a place, but it is not mine, it's theirs. There, T-H-E-I-R, is a ownership kind of noun, theirs in this case. But there refers to a group of people. There, that's a contraction for they are. They're going to paint it later. So T-H-E-R-E means over there, it's a place. Or you can say there is. Then you're talking about a subject of a sentence. T-H-E-I-R, possessive pronoun, something that belongs to a group of people. And there is a contraction. So, okay, number 8 topic, plagiarism. Plagiarism means you're not properly referencing data or ideas that you use in a paper. Plagiarism is not really, this is what people think, but plagiarism is not really when you get a friend to write a paper or when you buy a paper from the internet. That's cheating, that's stealing, but that's not really plagiarism. So here's a link of a good reference for plagiarism that agrees with the way I like to think about plagiarism. But to avoid it, make sure you properly reference websites, interviews, data. Everything in your paper that is not common knowledge must have a source. And you need to put it right there in the paper when you say it, not just at the end in some list of references. Tell people where you say it in the paper right there, who said it and what year, some kind of citation. Most of the time in economics, in the paper, we give the author and the year in the text, right where we discuss that information that's not common knowledge. And you need to show people where they can find the same information. Number 9, noun strings. A noun string is when you use a lot of nouns, more than one noun, to modify another noun. An example would be a red light camera. You need to hyphenate the red and the light to show that it's not really a red light that you're talking about, but it's a red light camera. The red light modifies camera, so you hyphenate the red light part. Four-way signalized, intersection. These 3 words modify intersection. That's why you have hyphens between the other 3 over here. The difference between all right and all right. They mean the same thing, but ALRIGHT is informal. Don't use it in a paper that you're writing. IE versus EG. IE means in other words, EG means for example. Data and number. Data is supposed to be plural, and number, I hear different opinions on this. But while data is plural, I just find it hard to say that the data are. Data to me is a collective noun. So the data is a collective noun like fish. But I don't know. It's hard for me to say the data are, even though that's correct. And lastly, literature review. You need a literature review in the paper, but in your paper don't talk about the literature much. Just have that as a title and then talk about individual papers, not the literature.